Ladies, gentlemen, and assembled company, welcome once more to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight we have stories of adventurous women from Japan, Iceland, and anywhere else she fancies. So it is with great pleasure that we welcome Sarah Lloyd-Winder. A bit of applause here.
What a wonderful introduction. Welcome to very sunny South Mimms, a tiny speck on the map. As explained earlier, if you think of London as a clock, I am at 12 o'clock. A tiny speck of a tiny
Just
speck.
up the road from the McDonald's on the M25. Sorry, it's much cheaper than the service station 2 miles further on. Sorry, I'm shut up now.
I don't go to McDonald's, you know, but it is now open, much to the thrills of many people in the area. Anyway, that is a digression, totally. So I am delighted to be here tonight, and I'm telling stories that relate to me as a dancer. They just sort of are a little collection about, they've got dance in them at some point. So I put them together as a little group. So here are my stories. There was a peddler walking along the road, calm, thinking of other things. And there was a little girl at the side of the road. And she said, "Can I come with you?" And he said, "Oh, you don't know where I'm going." "Well, where are you going?" she said. "I'm going to see the Mikado's ladies to sell them buttons and braid and ribbons and all the things that peddlers have." "Oh," she says, "that sounds so exciting. Please, can I come too?" "Okay," said the peddler, "but how long have you been sitting there waiting for me to go past?" "Oh," says the little girl, "in that way children do. Oh, so long, 100 years. As if 100 years, probably a minute. Anyway, he said she could come too. And he set off up towards the palace. And the little girl, she hopped and she skipped and she danced and she swung round and spun. And they got to the palace. And they went in to where the ladies were sitting waiting. Oh, and so much chatter was going on. And then the peddler said, "And I've brought a friend today. And she says she can dance for you." So the ladies all paused from their purchasing and they watched the little girl as she danced and span and skipped and hopped and span around and around until everybody thought she'd get dizzy, but she didn't. And then they all applauded. And the lead lady, or the first lady, said, Come to see the Mikado. He would love to see you dance." So the little girl was taken to see the Mikado. And there again, she skipped and she hopped and she danced and she spun and she whirled around. And the emperor was delighted as his ladies. And the emperor said to her, "What would you like as a reward?" And she went very shy the first time. She was quiet and shy. "Go on," he said. "What would you like?" She said, "I don't know if it's possible." "Oh, come on," he said, because he was a Mikado and anything is possible, he thought. And she said, "I want to learn. I want to learn music and singing and even more dancing and words and poetry." And he was so enchanted, he said yes. So the little girl moved to the palace and she learned. She learned music and dancing and she learned poetry. And she learned as well to be a lady of the court. And she grew up into the most beautiful young woman, very tall, very elegant. And the Mikado realised she was something very special. So special that when she was around, he was happy. And when she was away, he was unhappy. And the servants in the court all noticed that when the little girl, who was now a woman, grown to be Tamamo, when Tamamo was there, the Mikado was happy. When Tamamo was not there, the Mikado could be grumpy, shout, scream, and accuse people of all sorts of things. So everybody liked it when she was there. Now it came to the summer, and the Mikado decided he would have a beautiful party at his summer palace. They would light the gardens, they would put new illuminations in, there would be more sculptures, and they would have an enormous party with food and dancing and music, and it would be specially for Tamamo. And the evening went ahead, and it was as magical and wonderful as you can imagine. Can you imagine? All formal Japanese gardens illuminated with those lanterns, music around every corner, water trickling, elegant plants. Because you only had elegant plants, you don't have, your rubbish at the side, only elegant. It was an exquisite evening. And there, sitting at the high table, was the Mikado, and next to him, dressed in this beautiful red and gold kimono, was Tamamo. And everybody looked and saw that Tamamo was the one that poured him the wine. That was very special. And then, in a silence in the middle, the Mikado said, looking at her, "I love you, Tamamo." And it was as if an explosion had happened. The words seemed to echo round the garden. "I love you, Tamamo, I love you, Tamamo, I love..." And it echoed in the shop because the gentlemen and ladies of the court were there. Who was this Tamamo? Somebody that Mikado had picked up? Now he's saying he loved her in front of everybody? There was a sharp intake of breath. And then the weather. It took an enormous turn for the worse, and down came rain, followed by lightning and thunder, and people just jumped up and ran. It was a terrible end to an amazing party. But things got worse. For the Mikado stood up in amongst one of the most amazing lightning strikes, and he seemed to breathe and hiccup, and then he stopped and he collapsed on the ground. And Tamamo stood up over him, and later everybody swore, well, most people, well, a lot of people, that they saw light coming from Tamamo as she protected him from the rain and the thunder and the lightning and the mayhem of people. But as quickly as the light came, the light disappeared, and the servants came and they took the Mikado away. In the days that followed, the Mikado was found to be in a coma, and nobody could raise him, not even Tamamo. And he lay there in that state of nothingness, neither one thing nor the other. And all the wise physicians came and they fussed over him, and there was nothing they could do. So when you can't solve a problem with a physician, you call in the magician, the diviner. And he came and he looked. And he looked and he thought. And he said, "I need time." So they set aside an area. And he thought. And the words came to him in his mind, but he couldn't make sense of them. "I need to fast," he said. So fast he did, for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, he called all the physicians to him. and he called the head of the Arts Chancellorship, and he said, I have the answer. We must go to the Lady Tamamo. So these elegant men all marched into the ladies' quarters, not allowed. And they marched into Tamamo's private apartments, not normally allowed. And there they stood in front of her, and the diviner walked up to her and said, Lady, I have listened to the thoughts and prayers of the Mikado, and I have listened to the divining lines. And I say to you that there is something wrong at the heart of you. For what looks beautiful is not in song. What tastes glorious is rotten to the core. What looks beautiful is in fact the death thing. Now Tamamo didn't know what he was talking about. Nobody quite knew what he was talking about. But he took up a long, long golden scepter, and he reached over to the lady and he said, there is something rotten in your core. And he touched Tamamo. And as he touched her, she changed in ways that nobody there could understand. She got smaller and smaller, and hairier and hairier, and furrier and furrier. And out of her head came 2 little ears, and out of her face came a long little snout and 4 legs, orange and white. But unlike a normal fox, this is a magical fox, and she changed into a 9-tailed fox. And she took one look round the room, and she ran out of her room, out of the palace, out of the court, away, away, away. And as soon as she was gone, the Mikado awoke. And life continued at the palace. And strangely enough, he didn't seem to miss the lady so much when he was better. But the story passed on. And almost 100 years later, a wise man was walking in the desert. And he came upon a big rock. And he felt sadness and unhappiness hidden in the rock. And he put his hands on the rock, and the rock split. And out came Tamamo. And she cried and cried, and she said, for 100 years, I have tried to say sorry. For 100 years, I have tried to make changes, but I can't. And the wise man gave her his bowl and his staff and his robe. And with that forgiveness, she walked into the desert and she was released. And that is a fox story from Japan of Tamamo. Thank you. I like the fact that she sat up the side of the road and said, how long have you been waiting? 100 years! Because children do say that, don't they? They say the most amazing things. So that is my first dancing story, because she danced. This is a very different story. There was once a princess of Canterbury. She was the only daughter of the King of Canterbury. His queen had died some time ago, so there was only him and the princess, and it came to a point where he knew she had to get married because he had to pass on his kingdom and it would have to go to whoever she married. Now, she was quite a feisty young lady, and she said, hold on a minute, I don't just want to be given away to anybody who turns up, who you think's okay. I want a say in this. I want 3 questions. Well, her father loved her, and he said yes. So a proclamation was put out, and princes and knights all turned up. And they were asked 3 questions, And each time she looked at them and shook her head. And after a while, she said, they get worse, you know. At the beginning, they just said I was beautiful. Now they say I am as beautiful as the dawn. They get worse, and they're useless, all of them. So her father, desperate now, put out a proclamation that would go to the whole country, the whole of England, which was an enormous realm at that time, in the sense of it was a long way from one end to another. It hasn't got any bigger or smaller over the years. So, news that a princess was interested in a bridegroom got all the way from Canterbury in the south, up north to the Lake District. And there was a father with 3 sons that he desperately wanted to get rid of. Married would be good. So he went to his sons and said, I've just heard there's a proclamation come all the way from Canterbury. There is a princess there who is looking for a husband. All you have to do is turn up and answer 3 questions. Now, what could be easier? Well, the first 2 boys were delighted. They'd spent their entire lives fighting and learning to write really bad poetry and learning how to bow to a lady and learning how to do courtly dancing. And they were ready for it. The third one, wow. Now, the third son was a bit different. He didn't like all that messing around with swords and stuff. He lived in the Lake District. He walked the hills. He saw the eagles that still lived there at that time. This was only probably 1 or 2, and they're not very good at the moment. And he loved every single bird and animal and plant and knew all about them. Now, his father called him the shepherd. His brothers, they called him the idiot. But his mother loved him. And she called him my Jack by the hedge. You know, like the plant that is the Jack by the hedge. It's very tall and thin. Because Jack, you see, he wore a tall hat with a pom on the top. And he had a coat, a big coat. Lots of different colours and big pockets. Because if you're going to wander around and collect things and be a naturalist, you need big pockets. Now, father, looking at his 3 sons, said, you all go or you none of you go. And the 2 eldest went, we have to take that person with us. Yes, said his father. All 3 go. I think he was thinking a bit peace and quiet for a time, you know. Get rid of the children for a while. Anyway, off they went. The 2 brothers steeling themselves. Anyway, they were barely south of Kendal before he was off his horse and going, look, have you seen this egg? Isn't it beautiful? It's sort of blue-green and it's pointed. It's a thrush's egg. Isn't that lovely? They went, get back on the horse. Put it in his pocket. Further down. Oh, wow, look at that tree. It's all wiggly. Wow, we don't get wiggly trees like that. That is beautiful. Just get it down. Further down. Oh, wow, look, that tree's got nuts on it. And it went on like this endlessly. Every corner they turned, there was a new flower. There were new prints. He terrorized his brothers. He was happy and excited and loved seeing new things. They found him a total embarrassment. Anyway, eventually they got to Canterbury. And as soon as they said they were there to see the princess, they were ushered in the hall. And there they stood, the 2 elegant young men and the one in the strange hat and the big coat. And the 2 elegant young men seemed to suddenly have flowers and be presenting them to the princess. Whereas Jack just stared at the princess. And she said, what are you looking at? And if you start saying how beautiful I am and like my eyes are like almonds or, you know, just don't. Jack said, I wasn't going to say anything like that. Do you know, I was going to say your bosom looks really hot. I've got an egg and I bet if I put it on there, it would bake. And as he said that, apart from his brothers going, oh, the entire court went, excuse me. We don't talk about ladies' bosoms, and we certainly don't talk about princesses' bosoms. But the princess, oh, she was so heartily sick of all these namby-pamby boys coming along. And she was quite joyous, somebody else. But she was going to let him know. Really, she said? And how do you think you're going to get that egg off? Because you can't touch a princess's bosom, and you can't get anywhere near somebody with chop off your hand. But Jack wasn't bothered. He just went down into his pocket and he picked out that wiggly twig and he said, look, with this I could just flick it off. The princess, she was just giggling now. Nobody had been like this. Nobody had treated her like she was normal, and it was just incredible. But she was there ready with her third question. She said, and where would I get one of those from? And he said, oh, I know. I've got a nut. It would grow from this. And at that, she just collapsed into giggles. And then her giggles became laughter, and her laughter became joy. And she was just about to step down towards him when her father said, oh, excuse me. I mean, you may have passed my daughter's 3 questions, but I have something to say. And his daughter looked at him and said, really? We've never discussed this before. And he looked at her and said, we've never got this far before. I just want to know that you are the right man for the job, he said. So, in 2 weeks' time, you will be back here and you will stay up all night watching over my daughter with care, and then we shall check. And if at any point during that night you go to sleep, we'll chop your head off. Jack was totally happy with that. That's great, he said. I'll be back. See you soon. And he was gone, followed by his 2 brothers who, of course, they were horrified by the whole thing. And all they wanted to do was get away from there as fast as possible. So the 3 brothers went all the way back up north. And by the time they got there, Jack had to turn around and come back. But his journey back, oh, it was bliss. He had no brothers to stop him. Oh, he got leaves, he got frogs out of streams, he discovered snakeskin. He had a glorious time. And just as he was coming south of the Thames and heading towards Canterbury, he came upon a beautiful stream. And there he saw some fish that he'd never seen before. They seemed to be iridescent. He couldn't resist it. His hands were in the water, tickling underneath. And in seconds, he got 3 in his pockets. And then he realised he mustn't be late. So off he went, arrived at the palace just in time, and was greeted by the king. Come this way, he said, to my daughter's apartments. Off they marched, doors flung open, and there was a feast laid out. A big chair, wines, food, glorious loads of food. Because the king was not stupid. Feed up the young man and he'd go to sleep. And Jack, well, he was an innocent, wasn't he? He just sat down and went, oh, yes, drink, food, food, drink, drink, food, food, drink. And the princess, who was sitting at the other end of the table, said, you just went to sleep. No, I didn't, said Jack. Yes, she did, she said. Oh, I saw your eyes go. No, I was just thinking about pocket fishing. Pocket fishing? Come on. Yes, I do a lot of pocket fishing, said Jack. Do you not pocket fish down here in Canterbury? Oh, well, you know, it's all the rage up north. Yes, she said. One of your jokes, is it? Oh, no, said Jack, totally innocently. Do you want to see my fish? Okay, she said. Where's it going to come from? My pocket, he said. Hold on a minute. He put his hands in. He moved them around. Whoop! There was a fish in his hand. And she laughed. Have you got a pond? He said. No, she said. We'll make one. So they tipped out some load of food and they washed the bowl and they put water in it and he dropped his fish in. You got any more? She said. Let me see, I'll just go fishing, he said. And off he went again. Down and down and down. Oh, I've got one, he said. There was the second fish, and the two little fish swam round and round the bowl. And the princess was delighted. Oh, go to sleep, she said. I'll tell the king you've been awake all night. So Jack curled up in the chair and went to sleep. Morning came. Big rapping on the door. In marches the king with the executioner behind him. Jack immediately awake. But the king is suspicious. He said, you've just been asleep. No, I've been awake all night, said Jack. No, I've definitely been awake all night. I think you've been asleep, said the king, and if you have been, my executioner is here. No, I've been awake all night, haven't I? He said to the princess. She said, yes. Do you know, we've been pocket fishing. And the king looked at his daughter and thought, she's so gullible, you know. But she said, we have. Jack, do you think you could fish in the king's pocket? Of course, said Jack. He put his hand in his pocket very surreptitiously and walked over to the king and pulled out a royal pocket. Snuck his hand down, right down inside. A peck on the side of the leg. Oh, sorry, said Jack. Fish are a bit lively today. And out came that fish, wibbling and wobbling. Oh, look, I've got one, he said, passing it right over the face of the king, who was backing away, thinking, oh my God, was that in my pocket? And he rushed to the table and dropped it in. But by this stage, the king couldn't say no. And there was Jack saying, right, when are we getting married? And the princess, so shocked, she said, oh, I don't know, when do you want to get married? He said, oh, next week will do for me. And that was that. In the week, they were married. They were an unusual couple, but she was a very strong young lady, and he suited her well. He didn't listen and pander to her. He questioned her. And they became a very good king and queen for Canterbury. Such a long time ago. And that is the story of Jack. Thank you. Now, I have to look at the clock and it says it's 9:30. I'm doing quite well. But I know the time. So there was Jack, tall, gangly, danced around the place a lot. And at the beginning we had Tamama. The story is slightly darker, slightly different. The girl stood at the side of the square and she watched the big house, just as she'd done a couple of months ago. Then she had watched a long line of coaches, very expensive coaches, go into the centre of the house. It was the biggest house in the town. And coach after coach after coach went in. And everybody said he must be very wealthy. Well, today the girl stood and she looked and thought, we didn't know anything then, did we? Well, it was all excitement at first. You know how it is. A new bigwig comes to town, everybody invites him to dinner, and then they find out he's got a daughter. Every woman wants to invite her to tea, but she never comes. Then the father, Herr Doctor, says she's shy, she's unwell. But strangely enough, 3 o'clock every day, Monday to Friday, the young girl is sitting at the window with a book, reading. And then she closes it and the curtain's closed. And the next day, in a different beautiful dress, she sits and she reads. And she's so exquisitely beautiful that every young man in that town suddenly finds an excuse to get there at 3 o'clock every day. Oh, I've just got to. I am going to. Oh, I happen to be passing. As she sits in the window of the biggest house in town, reading in front of everyone. Now the girl, she is sick to death of this because it's affected all the boys, even her Fritz. And she thought Fritz was good. They'd been together for a while now. They were intended. And now he was lounging around like the rest of them, mooning after that girl. She stood there and she was angry. And as she watched, the door of the big house opened and Herr Doctor came out. He came out to shout at some children who were playing on the pavement in front of his house, because it was his house and you don't play on the pavement in front of his house. And he shouted and he screamed, and as he shouted at the children, he dropped his keys, and he was so intent at shouting at the children and chasing them down the street that he left behind his keys. And on the other side of the square, the girl saw. And never had she been so grateful for a handkerchief. And she went over. And oh, she dropped her handkerchief. And oh, goodness me, it was on the keys all the time. Oh dear. And she disappeared. Round the corner, 10 minutes later, she was back with every girl she could find. They went to the front door. They pretended they were knocking, but one of them was opening the door. They all crept in. Well, it was just like all the other big houses, big stair way up the middle, and they all went straight up to the big room where she would be sitting, tempting all their boys. And they flung open the door and ready to go. They stopped in horror, for the room was full. But then the girls started to move, but the people in the room didn't. And after that first, oh my goodness, what's that? They crept forward and realised they were dummies. No, they weren't dummies. When they found one with a stomach open, and all the cogs and the wheels of the mechanics of the clockwork that worked the moon was exposed. And then mayhem as they dashed round and round and round from one to the other, pushing and prodding and poking and moving and laughing and wobbling things. And hysteria was setting in, and the noise from the girls was getting that, because there is no noise like a group of girls that is possible, is there? It gets louder and louder and louder, and the laughter gets louder. We know. And that is when Herr Doctor came back. He burst in the front door. He could hear the noise upstairs. He knew his keys had gone. And he raced upstairs, calling all the servants and mayhem. And they were chasing girls round the room and round and in and out of all those mechanicals, knocking things over. And the girls nimbly, quickly ran down the stairs and escaped. All except one. Our girl who had instigated the whole thing. She managed to hide right at the back of the room behind a curtain. And she, as the doctor walked up and down, repairing his masterpieces. And then he flung open the curtains, and there sat the beautiful cocaine, the beautiful doll. It wasn't real, the girl said to herself. It's just like all the others. It's not a real girl. But then she listened to what he was saying. And he was stroking her and petting her and saying, I have an idea. If we steal a soul, you will become like those girls who've just been running round. I will collect a soul for you. Now the girl was rather shocked. Collect a soul? It's a bit creepy. How's he going to do that? Is he going to cut out somebody's heart? And at that moment, there was a bang at the window, and a ladder hit the window panes. The girl hid further back, but there was a figure climbing up the ladder. And her shock when she looked and saw it was Fritz, her Fritz. What an idiot! He was climbing up to the window to check whether that girl was real. Or even worse, come in and chat to her. And there was the doctor. But the doctor suddenly changed. Suddenly, he became affability himself. He stepped to the window and laughed. This is rather an unconventional way to get into my house, he said. Come in, come in. And he ushered Fritz off the ladder into the room. Oh, well, I'm delighted to meet you, young man. Would you like a drink? And he led him away from where the girl in the window was sitting and sat him down. I'll just get you a drink. What would you like? Something tall or small? Fritz had never been invited into an adult's room for a drink. He didn't know whether you had tall or small, and so he said, tall. The doctor went to the side of the room and started pouring drinks. And then the girl, she saw him take out a powder and tip it in. And suddenly her mind went back to what she'd heard. A soul for you. And as her doctor was walking across the room towards Fritz, the girl bounded out of her hiding place, rushed across the room, smashed the glass, grabbed Fritz and said, run, he's gonna kill you, run now! And Fritz was so surprised, he ran. They ran out, down the stairs, across the square, and she was going, he was gonna kill you, you idiot, what were you doing? Haven't you heard? He hadn't heard. He hadn't heard that they were all dolls, mechanical dolls. And he was so shocked. But then, when they realised they were free, he started laughing. Now, it was a small town, and the story soon got around everybody. And with the ending of the girl being there every day, Fritz and his beloved were going to get married now. And they would be married in the town hall on Midsummer's Day. And they would be given a dowry by the town. And so the day arrived. And they were standing there, about to be married. when Herr Doctor marched in, shouting and screaming about the destruction of his workshop, how many of his dolls had been tampered with, how he wanted money, and the dowry for this young lady should be passed immediately to him. Well, strangely enough, the mayor felt he'd been laughed at by this man. He, like everybody else, welcomed him into his home, spoken about the daughter in terms of reality, and he'd been laughing at them. Well, that's what the mayor thought. So the mayor said, no, we will pay for the dowry and you will get money from us. You will not take anything more from this lovely young couple. Well, he had his money. And that night, as the young couple celebrated and they danced around the square with all the other young couples on the other side, big doors opened, carriages came out, beautiful carriages, dark carriages, many, many carriages to carry the mechanical bodies going away and away and away. And that is my telling of the story of Coppelia the ballet. Thank you. I think that's about it, don't you? What do you think, John? Is that about?
I think you're spot on timing wise. What a professional. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Where was that last story from?
That's a sort of, it's a European tale, but you know, the Herr Doctor thing is a sort of Sandman figure.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a recurring,
they're recurring themes. I just wonder.
Yeah, because I've had one in the Iceland, but it didn't have the dancing bit. And then this is a sort of German Bavarian type one.
Well, it has all, you know. It's
but it was taken. Bits were taken by Hoffman from all over the place to create the story. So, yeah. But I just like the creepiness of, they go in the room and they stop, the girls stop and they look, and then the figures don't respond.
Yeah, there's that whole sort of. Mechanical stuff is always weird. It's great. It's great, and it had that whole. It was almost Hoffman cartoons about, you know, of those strange machines and stuff. It was. Yeah. Oh, loved it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're in South Mims at the moment, are you? Well, everything passes by South. The whole world passes by South Mims.
Yes, it goes north. It goes round the circle. It goes round the circle to the continent, or it goes from here up north and
up to north, up the A1.
Yes.
And brilliant. And
from here to Scott's Corner, or we go that way to the Lake District, or that way to Wales, sort of thing.
And before the 25 was there, that road around the top was our own. If you knew it, you avoided London by taking that road from Hatfield round. Marvellous, thank you. So although South Mims doesn't sound very romantic, it is where the world converges. In fact, it's probably the centre of the world.
It is. There were lots of pubs here, and there was a highwayman on the corner.
Highwayman,
and the famous story of the ride from London to York has been adopted by one of the pubs just in the village.
Fantastic.
So Dick Turpin is, you know, he came up here. He never did it. He was based in Epping Forest, because I looked for the story to see if it worked in South Mims.
Wonderful. Well, wonderful night. It's been a wonderful trip around the world with you tonight.
Thank you. And I think we've got a world of people out there.
Well, we have. I can see New Mexico twice. Actually, Bob's up in the top on my screen. That Bob's in the top corner and Liz is at the bottom. So they're and they're held apart by, oh no, they moved themselves around, and there was Morocco in between them, and Romania. And Janet, where are you? You're muted.
Lichfield,
Unmute.
Lichfield, Burton-on-Thames, somewhere there.
Ah, Maria, the two Marias land.
Yes.
Maria Watton and Maria Cradali.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Somewhere near there, I think.
Ah,
yeah.
so fantastic. Oh, it's been a great night. And on Paros down in India, down there. So she's New Delhi. So we've got a few continents with us tonight. There's so anyone else got any questions for Sarah while we have her on screen? We have her in the room. And you could, you know, if you want to buy her a drink, go to the site. There's a little box, the little hat there. You can drop something in the hat, because normally after these events, you'd go to the bar and you'd buy the artist a drink, or you know, it needn't be an alcoholic drink. It could be lemonade. It could be anything, or just a little pub sandwich. And well, no, something a bit classier. But you can still do that. You can still do that. You can put something in the hat, and I'm sure Sarah would appreciate it.
I would love some hats. Yes, I need a new hat.
Yes. See, the Americans have no problem with it. The Americans are well used to tip hats. You know, it's when I was gigging there, I had people would say, John, you got to push the tip. You got to push the tip jar. And I'd be very British and be very shy about it. And someone would grab it off me and run around the audience. And so there's but the rest of the world needs to, Bob, you need to train the rest of the world.
It's much better when you have somebody who does the hatting for you.
Yes.
As an ex-busker, I know that, you know, it was very difficult to remember to do the busking and then get your hat out at the end. It's easier when they walk around with the buckets. Bottling
has a whole different meaning in busking terms. It's not losing your bottle. Bottling is running round.
Yes.
Anyway, it's been lovely.
Thank you very much. Nobody's got any questions?
No. Well, another round of applause, please, Sarah Lloyd-Winder.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you for being a lovely, lovely audience on this wonderful, hot, sunny night in South Mim.
Oh, there will be a lot more people watching than are in the room.